Hi, welcome to episode 6 of Lean Coffee Talk, episode 6 of season 2. Mark Graban here, joined by
Jamie Flinchbaugh. Glad to see you, Mark. It's been quite a while.
it's been a while. Well, we don't do these on any particular schedule. The holidays and life get in the way, but Happy New Year. We're recording this on January 2nd. Hope you had a good holiday season.
Yes, Happy New Year to you. We are here in 2026, and yeah, things have been busy for all sorts of reasons. Didn't even seem that busy, but it also found really hard to find free time.
So here we are in a holiday week, and we both watched different football yesterday on the first. I think that's just, that's something it's barely in common. It's different footballs. What were you watching?
Yeah, I was watching English football Premier League matches, which were not terribly exciting. I mean, there were some good games, but Uh, there's 2 goals scored across 4 games, so not exciting day. And then, I was watching Championship, which is kinda like AAA baseball for those that don't know, kinda one division below, but it's a very exciting league and a very exciting season. Very, very tight. Just a couple of results can have you go from bottom third in the table to top third in the table just like that. So it's a really tight, really interesting, league. So yeah, it's during this time, a lot of leagues will shut down for a few weeks, but in England, it's actually they pack in a schedule. It's called the festive fixtures, and they play every few days, and it's for people like me. It's great.
I was watching college football, AAA level, I guess, to the NFL. Playoff games, yeah, I was glued to the TV all day, watched the first game fairly intently, had some family over during the Rose Bowl. We did watch a bit of the Rose Bowl parade, and that got
Mm.
recorded, so I might go back and watch some of it again, marching bands
Yeah.
and all that's up my alley. But then, the game that I really didn't watch much of turned out to be the good game today, the close game. We were watching a movie and, so I could go back and watch highlights today, but the craziness that is we were talking before we started recording, poorly designed college football system. I made the comment like, well, it's not even designed, it's just evolved. Reminds me of the mess you see in other industries. Like nobody would have sat down and sketched this out as a startup.
No, if you include all the variables from the portal to the coaching changes to just the way the schedules work, there's clearly a lot of conflicts between what's good for coaches, what's good for programs, what's good for fans, what's good for television,
Yeah.
what's good for the players, and those things are not converging. It's been going through changes. It's going through a lot of change right now. It's some of it's all necessary, but it's not all good.
In the playoff, we're in the second year of a 12-team playoff, and that doesn't seem to have been designed well. In fact, they tweak it every year. We could say, "Oh, okay, well, that's iteration." I've always said this is a bit contrarian that, our ability to iterate is not an excuse to design a system poorly. And I think one evidence of the poorly designed system, like, the 12-team playoff, the top 4 teams get the quote unquote reward of a bye week, which gives them a longer layoff. And in the 2 years now, 7 of the 8 teams that have gotten that bye lost to a team who had played more recently. And, Indiana yesterday is the only team that's bucked that trend. And people are saying like, well, okay, we got to change that because it doesn't seem like a reward to the top 4 teams. And maybe these teams are all so kind of equally almost as good that there's, excuse me, randomness involved in who's going to win a little bit, but it doesn't seem like a reward to be number 4 and get a week off instead of being number 5 and playing again.
Well, having a week off allows you to rest some players and recover and heal and practice, but pretty much had a month off. The teams that had the bye, and that's a long time. That gets you out of your rhythm. You've got to, you were all dialed in. you're geared up, you're learning to execute each week, and then kind of go, yeah, we're going to play in a month. Um, yeah, there's a lot of edge that I think could be lost in that time period. So
We think about the role of executives. I mean, these football coaches are paid 8, $10 million a year. It's their job to figure that out. If you're worth the money, turn the bye week into an advantage instead of a disadvantage. But
but there's nothing like competition, which is, even if you call it, even if you had a scrimmage, it's like you
Mhm.
don't count, and then you don't want to injure players. So yeah, but there's nothing can beat of all the things you can do as a coach. Nothing beats the actual edge of competition. And even when I was a soccer coach, I would try to create in my warm ups. I would try to create some sort of false competition, even small things. We would do like relay tic tac toe with pennies. And it's just, you got to move fast and you got to make decisions on the fly, and it's competitive because otherwise it's like, yeah, let's go do some sprints. Well, for what? Right. Do I actually go full out? And then all of a sudden I'm trying to beat my teammate in a little game for fun. And I go a little faster. Right. So it's hard to replace that as a coach. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if, do they end up with just, do they go to 16 teams then?
well, that's the forcing function to 16 of like, well, then nobody gets a bye, and then there's more games and more money and follow the money.
Yep, and all the teams that were on the bubble and didn't get in, including the very famous, "I'm gonna take my ball and go home" Notre Dame complaint, where they wouldn't even play in a bowl game because they didn't make the playoffs. So, yeah, it's a broken system. It that will surely get better at some point, but again, the decision-making body is very distorted in a lot of ways. So because it's so convoluted and overmeant.
It's bodies. I mean, there's no
Right.
commissioner of college football. But yeah, one other thing that just kind of makes me think about maybe like, corporate life and HR issues and talent identification and talent management is the story of the Indiana coach, Kurt Signetti, who I think he's in his early 60s. And this is his first high level power conference, as they call it, head coaching job. Now, he had been an assistant under Nick Saban, but he got a job. He got a couple of jobs at lower levels of football. And then James Madison, and he did well there. And he got hired into Indiana. I was like, who's this guy that most people haven't heard of? And, he said something like, I just win, Google me. And he just won at Indiana. They're undefeated this year. It's a Cinderella story. And I'm like, like the teams that are kicking themselves for not hiring this guy a decade ago. He seemed to just have the coaching skills, the leadership, the attitude, forming a team that's not all five-star recruits. I'm like, does this ever happen in a company where like somebody who's in there? This is not meant to be a discussion of age discrimination, but let's say somebody who's, 60 years old, like, oh, we're in a shortage. We're going to promote someone to plant manager. And they just totally kill it in
Yeah.
their first 2 years in the job, and then the company is like, "Oh, they don't have as much of a runway yet. Man, I wish they'd been a plant manager 20 years ago. They could have really moved up the ranks, and now it's too late."
And I think it's a false assumption that the coach was the same coach 10 years ago. Just people might think often is we sometimes look at just, is it just talent, or was this cultivated learning through experience?
Yeah.
Lower conferences took off the pressure and allowed him to experiment, to learn with less scrutiny and develop his confidence, his rhythm, his style, his everything. And we see this in soccer coaches. You have a talented player who is, probably going to be a talented coach, and they start off at, a lower tier program to build themselves up. But everybody's expecting them to be great. They get a big shot early, and then they falter.
Mhm.
Now the shine is off the star. But then you see some that just, they take their time. They work in the lower leagues. They build themselves up. They focus on learning. They go be an assistant coach under a great head coach and learn how to do it from them. And so there's, I'll say, always one of my favorite quotes is, "Experience is not what you've been through; it's what you take from it."
Mm.
What it does mean is if for the person that does learn deliberately, experience does matter. It's not an automatic ingredient, but it can make a huge difference. So maybe what we're seeing in him now is the I don't say the final step, but the
Mhm.
latest step in a long journey of self improvement and self cultivation.
Good point. He might have, if he got one of those jobs 10 years ago, he might have crashed and burned and failed. Or I mean, look back to NFL football coaches. Bill Belichick was considered a failure with the Cleveland Browns. My grandmother used to complain about what a bad coach he was, and he didn't win a lot. And then, he goes to the Patriots and he has Tom Brady, and now he's considered a Hall of Fame coach, and he hasn't done well without Tom Brady.
And of course, this guy does have a Heisman Trophy winner and is at the helm in the back. So, yeah, I have to say, I don't really have a horse in this race, but I'm definitely pulling for Indiana now. As a Michigan guy, I was pulling, just not Ohio State. And now I'll pull for Indiana.
Yeah. All right, so let's do a bit of a rundown. We're going to cover a couple just introductory comments. We're going to talk a little bit about a coffee topic, and then previously we had invited people to submit questions. So we're going to cover a couple of those questions. Depends on how long we ramble on in response to these questions. So that's going to be the format, and people can check the show notes. The link for how to submit questions is still open. We'll revisit that and see what questions come in and see if that's a regular feature, or we'll see.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we did get some good questions, so I'm looking forward to reviewing them.
Yeah, a lot to chew on. So looking back to Christmas, I mean, I'm in an age where I get more excited about the gifts I'm giving in some cases compared to gifts I'm receiving. So we were going to talk about a meaningful gift you gave. So I was going to share, and I don't have it handy to show for those who are watching us, but I'll describe it for those who are listening. So my wife, back in the BlackBerry era, she loved her BlackBerry and the keyboard, and she was a holdout of. And I had long switched to iPhone and gotten over the idea of, like, yeah, typing on glass. I think it turns out mostly better. And she was basically forced by her company to give up the BlackBerry and switch to iPhone. Well, there's a company that does basically like a tear down of different tech products. And so my one of my gifts to my wife was this framed, it's on a display board, a complete teardown of a BlackBerry Bold, and all of the pieces from the case to the keyboard to the cameras and the circuit board. And I mean, it's a great example of upcycling, where this BlackBerry would have no tech value, but to then buy one and to kind of make it a piece of art that she could put up in an office, became something that she was actually pretty thrilled to open, and thought it was really cool and fitting for her, and a conversation piece for her office, I think.
Yeah, that's cool. And I have a friend who is also a dedicated. You have to rip this out of my fingers.
The cold dead hands. Yeah.
So yeah, I had one. I liked it, but I was also happy to move on from it. So yeah, that's pretty neat, especially for as an engineer, right? Someone that appreciates the technology behind it as well. So that's awesome. Yeah, I was not that thoughtful this year. I just had a lot going on, and I was sort of distracted, and I don't think I did terribly great, but I did get I actually blogged about this. My wife and I went to a private viewing at Lehigh. She's an architect, or was educated as an architect, and did that work for several years. And she's been involved in lately. She's been setting up alumni panel discussions for students to talk about careers in our architecture and design, working with Lehigh. So We got invited to a viewing of a documentary about Laurie Olin, who's very famous for those that follow it, a landscape architect. Did Battery Park, and he did a whole bunch of other things. So we've all probably been in a space that he's touched
Yeah.
at some point. And then there was a Q&A with him. The head of the department, did a discussion with him after the viewing of the film. So we went. It was very cool. He was a very interesting guy. But what he does is he goes around and sketches things. He just sits places and sketches. And so, a lot of his sketches are not published in books. So,
Mhm.
like, one of these books of his sketches around Italy, one of his time in Italy, where he would just sit in just sketch a cafe or sketch a person or sketch a road and just sketch. And so he has these volumes and volumes of these, but only some of it's published. So I got that book for my wife. So
That's
something
that
was
sounds thoughtful. That's good.
it was the it was fun. Um, yeah. So I am trying to reserve things that I would normally just buy for myself and go throw it
Mhm.
on and
Yeah.
hold back a little bit,
True.
so that there's something left. So I still enjoy Christmas. But yeah, there was a lot of last minute stuff this year.
Yeah.
So coffee?
Yeah. So the coffee topic here today is about beans and roasting. Where do you get your beans and why?
Yeah, so it's, obviously, we talk so much about equipment and process, right? That we sometimes forget about the beans, right? The core ingredient that makes coffee coffee. And and so it matters a ton, right? So people will be, oh, starting to use this process, starting to use that process. What about the beans, right? So
Mhm.
you're struggling with your coffee, check the beans, right? That's
Yeah.
almost one of the first places to go. And this is why well, I so much hate, I'll say a K cup is
Mhm.
it's old stale coffee, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost always a dark roast, and you put enough hot water through it, you're going to get enough extraction that it's still a cup of coffee. But the beans matter, and the number one rule, if you really want to care, is fresh.
Right.
Uh, so I used to not care that much, right? And then I started ordering online because I thought I wanted to buy in bulk or something, and experiment with different things. But then, really just discovered the roasting. And, when you buy local, you're much more likely, especially if they're a place that puts a roast date on it, to have fresh beans. And and also control it because you can look at the date before you buy
Mhm.
before you go home with it. So I think while there's some artisans out there that do specialty beans and you want to get it mail ordered and subscribe and get some geisha and stuff like that, you're just getting some basic everyday beans.
Yeah.
Freshness of the roast matters more than any incremental value that somebody
Mhm.
can act uh,
Yeah.
being a better roaster.
Yeah. You can't make good coffee from bad beans.
Yes.
Quality, the different factors. I took a real deep dive into this a little over 20 years ago into coffee roasting. Actually, I bought a small home coffee roasting appliance and was actually kind of researching. I was taking an entrepreneurship class, and that I was actually kind of exploring the business model around custom coffee roasting, and didn't pursue that really. But a couple of things I've learned is if you look at the value stream from the coffee plant, which I've gotten to see up close in Kona, Hawaii once, and take a raw coffee bean like right off the plant and smell it and kind of just see where that is. Well, in my exploration of coffee roasting, you can buy unroasted or what they call green coffee beans. And if I'm remembering right, like the shelf life of the green coffee bean is quite long, like the year, as long as you're storing them. They're just stored in burlap bags in a warehouse somewhere. I don't think they have to be, uh, you know,
There's not much
Specifically
oxidation that goes on to that. There's
temperature controlled. And but once you roast them, then they do have a bit of a shelf life. And I think the other thing to look at with the date is you don't want beans yesterday that were roasted yesterday, because I think there's a period of about a week where they're like off gassing
yeah,
something
sometimes
for a period.
overstated,
Yeah.
and how much you really have to wait. And you don't have to wait, you just have to be more careful. It's just harder.
Yeah.
So yeah, right off the roaster, probably not as good. Harder to control because the gases are still being emitted. But yeah, I'd say a few days, a few weeks. But you get and a lot depends on how you store it, right?
Right.
Vacuum seal, you
Mhm.
can freeze it actually, and a lot of people just continue to use the sealed bags, right, and
Mhm.
just reseal it and squeeze the air out. But yeah, you basically want to have it, I think, within a month.
Yeah. We can do a whole episode around storing beans. That could be a different topic, because there are some who say, "Yes, keep it in the freezer," and then there are some who say, "No, no, no, don't do that." But I've got an example here of, a local roaster here in Northern Kentucky. I'm gonna hold up a bag here. It's a coffee shop not far down the road called Unitaza, and, this is a Honduran coffee, and the coffee shop in particular, the owners have, Honduran, origin. So they have, like, your typical pastry, coffee shop kind of foods, but then they also have some Honduran breakfast hot items
Mhm.
and different dishes, that are interesting. But yeah, this is their, espresso blend, and I bought it sometime back in December. I'm trying to remember exactly when, but it does have the roasted date, 12/1. And kind of like, other products, like I think just more information. I appreciate the disclosures. And it actually says here, roasted by, they didn't roast it themselves, but it was roasted by Carabello Coffee, which is a very well known, I think I've mentioned them
Mhm.
previous episodes where I have bought beans from them, also a local company here in our town. But, I'd have to go back and look. Maybe this company, the shop Unitaza, in particular, they're proud of Honduran coffee. But, to a point you made, that if they don't have the machine or the expertise, it's still local. It's still kind of that same.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna open the bag up and smell it. It smells delicious, even kind of through the bag.
Yeah. No, I always love doing that. And I have a bag. It's the only bag that I haven't opened yet, but and this is not what I'm drinking, but from Toasted and Roasted in Bethlehem, PA. So these are decaf, which is why I haven't opened them yet. I go through decaf slower.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's not fresh. I just finished the last batch I have yesterday, so I'll probably open these this afternoon. Um, but this is my favorite roaster, local roaster. But yeah, you get more information. I mean, it's roasted December 18th. It was the process used for decaf, the elevation they were grown at. You can get the farm if it's not a blend, right? Um, so I always appreciate that additional information that we go through. But once I open a bag, it usually goes straight into not a hopper, but into a vacuum container.
Yeah.
Hopefully I extend the life. I did get a couple bags of coffee from my daughter who bought from local roasters in Milwaukee and brought them home with her. So a little the surplus side right now,
Yeah.
of beans, but yeah, I probably can't drink faster just to get through them all. So we'll see how long they all last.
I am gonna report a near miss here, that I had the bag open and I was smelling it, and I don't know if you noticed, I clumsily dropped it. And thankfully, it landed, boom, bottom down, and I did not spill coffee beans all over the floor of the office. But you do raise a good point of, like, squeezing the air out of the bag. And, most of these bags have basically, like, a one-way vent, and I think some of that's for the off-gassing right
Yeah,
after it's been
that's the
roasted.
main
But I
reason
know,
of the
like, you can squeeze the air out, and air is not getting in through that
Yep,
vent. There's
absolutely.
a little piece of technology that's apparently pretty inexpensive enough to incorporate into a coffee bean bag.
Yes, it's a one-way valve and not terribly expensive, but it does make the bags, it's not as cheap as a Ziploc bag, right? So,
Right.
it is, slightly expensive packaging, but yeah, so beware. I'm always, of two minds of this, but really of one mind. Beware of roasters that don't put on the roasted on date.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, a lot of the times they just do it because most consumers don't care, but it does matter. So I think your better roasters will generally do that because they know the more discerning customers care about the roast.
And and it's a tradition here. We find some reason to rip Starbucks, and I say this as a frequent customer. I was in a Starbucks once, and they had coffee bags of beans, and they were promoting, for one, that the beans were quote unquote hand scooped. Okay, so a robot machine didn't fill the bag, but then it was like, it was like they had you're making faces for
Yeah,
those who aren't
that's doesn't make any add any value.
the video, hand scooped. And but then like the date was like, oh, the bags were filled on this date. I'm like, how long? That's meaningless. That's a dumb misappropriation of the idea of the actual. It was probably roasted weeks before, if not longer. I don't know their supply chain, but I'm guessing it was not freshly roasted.
Yeah, that's a concern. So yeah, and of course, if you're gonna over roast it, it's gonna mask the lack of freshness. If you're gonna
Mhm.
sugar and milk, it's also gonna mask the lack of freshness. But yeah, there's it's pretty rare because I'm also cheap. It's pretty rare that I'll throw away beans just because
Sure.
they're no longer fresh. I'll just kind of power through, but and be like, "Yep, it's not as good as it was." But
But if
um,
you found a bag that had been sitting there for years, you might draw the line.
oh,
If it was lost in the back of the cabinet or something.
no, I would. Those would be the beans I use when I run stuff through the grinder to clean it, and then
Yes.
flush that through with some other beans that you're not going to drink. That's what I'd use those for. So,
There's another creamy process. There's so much process
there's a
involved
lot
in
of process, but
coffee.
yeah, we can. We'll spread it out. We'll talk about it over time.
Okay.
All right,
All right.
we get into our lean topics here.
Yeah. So we've got some questions that were submitted. We're going to send out as a thank you a lean coffee talk coffee mug. It's not fully designed. Jamie and I were still brainstorming on something that we hoped, was a little more clever than just slapping the logo on the mug. But we're going to get those mugs.
Burger.
Yeah. We'll hold those up and show those mugs in a future episode, and we'll send those out as a thank you for these questions. So the first question, I will just leave it on a first name basis. Sally asked this: how do we cultivate a culture of scientific thinking and psychological safety in higher education, where leadership is distributed, improvement is continuous, and uncertainty is embraced as a source of innovation rather than fear? So I think what she's describing there is an ideal state where leadership is distributed, improvement is continuous, and uncertainty is embraced. And it sounds like the current condition might be less of that. That doesn't sound only like a higher education problem. It also kind of sounds like a healthcare problem.
Yeah, it's there are some characteristics around higher education that make them not unique, but a little bit different. There's a lot of fragmentation. There's a lot of control around budgets, and there's limited opportunities for promotion. That's not really how
Mhm.
things, right? Especially in the academic side, right? There's department heads and there's deans and there's provosts, but a lot of your talent stays at the individual contributor level, essentially, by design. It's what they wanted. But it's a complex mix of stakeholders, from alumni to government to grant givers to, of course, students and then parents, community, all sorts of things. So yeah, there's some complexities there, and there's some restrictions that prevent some of that. But in a lot of ways, it's just like any other organization. It's a lot of processes, a lot of functions, a lot of different expertise, and a lot of pressure. It's just going through more now than it had probably in previous decades. So yeah, I think I think it is worth anytime you go, oh, we're different, right? You start to look at, well, what are the characteristics that make us different? How are those strengths? How are those maybe weaknesses or challenges to overcome? And then how are we like everybody else, right? Because in the end, it's organization made of human beings trying to serve people.
Yeah.
There's a lot that's similar between all organizations.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the general advice about how do we cultivate a feeling of psychological safety in people is pretty universal. Like we don't mandate it. We don't say you should feel safe. Like people decide how safe they feel based on how leaders and colleagues are interacting with them. So I would think maybe in higher ed, do assistant professors get rewarded or punishing for disagreeing with tenured professors or challenging the status quo, and not like academic disagreements, but just around policies and how we do things. How does the department chair or the dean or the provost or the president, I think, leaders cultivate psychological safety by, modeling these behaviors of candor and openness and reward people for doing the same. So you can't, I would argue, you can't have scientific thinking or scientific improvement if people don't feel safe to point out a problem, if they don't feel safe to discuss root causes without getting punished for being a troublemaker, don't make us look bad. That happens a lot, sadly, in healthcare. Do people feel safe to really test a change as opposed to having to be right and then go implement it? Like
Mhm.
there's points in scientific improvement or lean improvement models, PDSA, where psychological safety is really necessary, or we can't do that well. But I think it comes back to behaviors in any environment.
Yeah, I think it's behaviors and the leadership enablement of those behaviors, and I think that's always going to be the cornerstone of that psychological safety, of scientific thinking, of being willing to say, let's try it. I think where higher education can differ is there's also the system, right?
Uh,
And the rules that allow what's okay and not okay. So, for example, I serve an advisory council um, that is supposed to help cultivate research into commercial use. It's the simplest way to put it without going deep into things. But what does the system actually give you credit for? Do you get credit for publishing a paper, but no credit for taking your research and turning it into an actual company? That's a system problem. And of course, we can change that, but not easily because some of the rules in higher education move slowly, just like they do in government, just like they do in healthcare, because it's sometimes hard to change it back. And then companies in the same way, right? Well, do we have any rules, or do we have a lot of old momentum, right? So I've worked with a lot of 100-year-old family health businesses, and in a lot of ways, slow moving and having some, we're not going to jump around and do whatever somebody comes up with
mhm.
because it provides some of their stability,
Sure.
but it also becomes a constraint, can become a constraint on that experimentation. So we have to pay attention to the system and, and really understand, are we bucking the
Mm,
system, or do we have enough degrees of freedom that we can at least try things, right? We can at least experiment
mhm.
and then see how it goes from there.
Yeah.
And the universities, or there's the administrative side, there's of course the academic side. It's hard to kind of say, hey, let's try this major out. And you offer it for 2 years, decide, we don't think we want to keep doing this. And you have 30 people who agreed to come to your university and take this major, and they don't get to finish. It's not easy. Some experiments are harder to do than others. And so we just have to find ways to cultivate those tests. What's
Mhm.
the opportunity to do the experiment?
Yeah. And, psychological safety doesn't mean everyone gets to do whatever they want.
No.
It means you get your say. It means you get to disagree, but then others have feel safe to push back and disagree. And, it's supposed to be an environment where the best idea wins out or the best hypothesis gets tested. And then hopefully wins out in practice. But, I think sometimes people misunderstand and they get frustrated, even in the context of Kaizen and continuous improvement is like, they said they wanted my ideas and I shared ideas and they didn't listen. So I'm done participating. Like, hopefully, leaders close the loop. If we decide not to move forward with something, we explain why, as opposed to saying like, well, the boss said no. Like, well, okay, that'll shut people down, but we can navigate these things.
And I think there's an input and an output factor there. The output, as you just indicated, is do we close the loop, right? Do we give feedback? Oh, well, if that's wrong, we hurt people. So we're not going to even try that, right? The input side are the boundary conditions and is the direction clear, whether it's vision, mission, strategy, right? So if you're running a restaurant, for example, a chain, and your strategy is we're going to simplify the menu, right? That's the strategy. We're trying to simplify the menu, provide fewer but better choices that people really want, and we're going to try to nail them. And somebody comes in and goes, "Oh, I want to try this new offering." Well,
Mhm.
that's inconsistent with
Right.
the strategy. So that's why your idea isn't going to fly. And so if you get those inputs right, where you kind of create the sandbox in which experimentations at least make directional sense, you're more likely to get suggestions that you're gonna you're gonna favor. You have to have a clear strategy, you have to have a clear direction, you have to have clear priorities, and of course, you have to communicate those to people in ways that they can then experiment to help enable the strategy instead of perhaps taking a different direction.
Yeah. And, back to Sally's question, one other point I'll make is, she uses the word cultivating a culture. I know Sally enough. I'm pretty sure she's read my book, The Mistakes That Make Us. And I use that phrase, cultivating a culture, and explore a little bit in the book that building culture, it's like building trust or building psychological safety. We should think of it as like planting and tending to a garden over time, cultivating plants. You don't implement a plant. You do the things that are required to prepare it to grow, let it grow, keep it alive, keep it thriving. So yeah, this takes time. And unfortunately, you could destroy as quickly as you could destroy trust after spending a lot of time to build it up, or you can destroy psychological safety, sadly, pretty quickly.
Yep, absolutely. All
All
right.
right. Thank you, Sally. We'll move on to another question.
Yes, let's do that.
Okay, so this is submitted by Dwayne. It says, "Hi, Mark and Jamie. I feel like my question is the most basic, yet I haven't found any clear recommendations. How do I approach balancing coaching, being direct, teaching, getting quick results, and building for the long term as I initiate a lean journey in my department with hope that it becomes contagious and spreads throughout the company?" And he added a little context. It's a relatively small company, 100 people, doesn't have a history of lean. It sounds like he's trying to lead this locally and is trying to influence up and out. But I mean, I think he does raise a very, he says it's a basic question. I think it's a sophisticated and nuanced question about finding balance. What do you think, Jamie?
Yeah, well, I think an interesting aspect and an important aspect is that he's not responsible for, accountable for, and owning the company journey. And I think that's a very different set of questions, right? So, how do I start a company journey is very different, I think, than how do I start a department journey? Because the degrees of freedom and the variables that you can control are different, right? So I think you have to be clear what's your objective? What's your why? What are you trying to accomplish? Is vital to answer. And he does indicate in part that he wants this to be a good example for others. And then that for to catch on and go other places. That's not a necessary, that doesn't have to be part of your objective. But if it is, then I believe you need to make your journey very visible. And you actually have, and when I say journey, I mean the awkward, messy steps to make progress and stay. So, oh, we're going to keep it secret. We're going to do our thing. And then we're going to present a final product. Not that we're ever done, right? But like,
Right.
oh, look at all the stuff we're doing now. It's like, oh, we want to copy that. Well, okay, just copy the end state. No, we have to copy the journey. We have to learn from the journey. So in a lot of cases, you have to document more. You have to create, before and after. You have to do some reflection along the way to capture the lessons learned and the mistakes you've made. Because if other people in the department next door is going to copy and learn from you, they need to understand how you got there, not just where you ended up. So that's my first piece of advice. The second piece of advice is you can't get ahead of the rest of the company in terms of what's the priorities are, what the
Right.
objectives are, or even just what I would call the API with the rest of the organization, right? If you have to report up in PowerPoint a lot of historical data that's not going to produce any Kaizen or problem solving, then that's the expectation.
Sure.
You can't just kind of go, yeah, we're opting out of that API with the rest of the company.
Cool. But you could apply lean thinking to doing that,
Yeah,
reducing the waste and producing
reduce the weight,
the waste.
make better, maybe
Yeah.
indicate, maybe tell a better story about the problem solving you are doing, but you can't just kind of go, oh, that's not lean. We're not going to do it. So you have to be cognizant that, you don't own the company
Right.
unless you do. Company, there's rules. You might disagree with the rules. They may be anti-lean. Um, so you got to stay within your boundary conditions and work at that level. That's a common mistake. I think people kind of get out over their skis sometimes and they create some enemies. That's not the goal.
Yeah. And Dwayne shared some context. His role is senior director of manufacturing. So it sounds like that is company wide, but it's functional. And, I think he could use lean. Probably the best case he can make for lean, or the best exposure or impression, is to do manufacturing exceedingly well in support of the company's strategy and success. Right. So I think, if others aren't interested about quote unquote doing lean, maybe at first, I mean, he might use that language and methodologies within his team, but maybe to the owners of the company, like all they care about is being great at manufacturing. And
And there could be a lot of influences, sales could be dropping cut-ins
yeah.
at the last second, and he may not control scheduling and
Mhm.
planning, may not control supply chain and product design, right? So many influences, right? But I think that's fundamental. And some of the verbs that were used, coaching, and I'll call it driving results and teaching. I think balance is the right term, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of what they ask for. Balance is the right term. You need to create enough why for people. You need to create that inspiration. You need to create some curiosity, feed that curiosity, and get some work some work done. And I think to the point around getting results, quick results, is if we're not getting results in any domain, whatever, whether it's safety or quality or cost or whatever it is we want to go after, we're not getting any results that we can even feel confident in. They may not be measurable, right? Not all
Mhm.
is measurable, but if we aren't getting any results, are we really learning? Right.
Yeah.
And we're kind of asking people to just take it on faith as opposed to seeing the evidence for themselves. So I would, you know, I'm a big fan of small steps where we get to learn about what's working and why. We get to be curious about that. And we get inspired by the fact that we can actually improve our result.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think balance is key. So one extreme example that comes to mind, there was a health system I got invited to come visit, and they were maybe like, 5 years into this lean journey with kind of a process improvement department, and, kind of executive sponsorship of lean, but not a lot of executive participation. It was kind of lean as this function that was supposed to train and influence and help people. And I asked the leader of this group, well, okay, so 5 years into it, like if somebody were to ask, so how is the organization better, measurably better because of everything that you're doing? And how would you describe the benefits, and he thought for a minute. He said, "We've been building capabilities," and I'm like, "That's an answer that might get you fired at some point."
Yep.
There's
And
nothing
that's
wrong with building
what I talk about
capabilities.
leadership. I mean, but capabilities to do what, right? And and this is where I love problem solving as a foundational capability, which even though it's many capabilities and not just one, but we're solving real problems.
Yeah.
And and so yeah, maybe we can't point to this aggregate measure where everything rolls up and we can go, there's $1 billion right there.
Well, and cost wouldn't be the only benefit, but yeah.
But if you can, yeah, so yeah, do we need a headline? No, we don't need a headline, but we also need to be able to say we are making a difference with the work that we're doing because that's what it's there for.
Yeah. I mean, I would have loved to hear examples like, well, we reduced door to dock time in the emergency department by 70%, or at least, some examples of not even just quick wins, but difficult systemic value stream improvement, like, just at least something measurable that you could point to. Otherwise, there's a risk that a leader is going to say, oh, well, we can't afford this well-intended, good-sounding initiative anymore. And, the other extreme of doing nothing but tallying up potential cost savings. Like, I mean, that's the one consultant game of, you come in and you put together a spreadsheet and a binder full of all of the projects that would save $50 million. Here you go. Thank you. I'm going to claim victory, and nothing gets implemented.
Yep.
That's not good either. So, like, it's balance, like the balance. I'm a bit of a contrarian about, this quite not contrarian, but the idea of leading with questions. I think generally that's really effective. Asking open-ended inquiry questions instead of just telling people what to do. But there's a time and a place to be directive.
Absolutely.
My one example would be like if you're a plant manager walking down the aisle and someone's not wearing their safety glasses, it's not time to stop and do a five whys.
Yeah. We're not trying to inspire people to wear their safety glasses.
I mean, and for one, that plant manager better be wearing their own safety glasses to then say, "Hey, pull them down from the top of your head."
Yep.
We're going to say like, "Oh, did you forget? Are you intentionally not wearing them?" Or you're going to say, "Hey, you got to put those on."
Yeah.
No, and that's okay too.
There's nothing wrong with being directive if we're doing it in the right place, right?
Mhm.
If it has understanding, if we're being directive about something that people have the capability to actually pull off. And I want to add a note around coaching, even though it's a small company. If you're coming in and you're the only person that really gets lean, you're trying to move the needle. There's a tendency to want to coach everywhere all the time, and it's not a strategic approach. And so this is where I'd want So maybe if I put an equation to the balance, I want a whole bunch of being directive on here's the activities that we're going to do. I want to do some teaching so that they have the capability and knowledge to do it. And then I'm going to handpick who I'm coaching because they're going to be my levers.
Mhm.
They're gonna help me move the organization by going deeper with a handful of leaders who can then go support others. And when I say leaders, I don't care what their job title is. It could be a process engineer on the floor or the safety person, but who do I think can help me move the organization? We pour my coaching into those people and let them help me move the organization forward.
Yeah. Well, and I think sometimes the directive is, we are going this direction. Here's what we need to accomplish. Now, I'm not going to tell you exactly how to do it because I don't know, but
Yep.
let's figure that out together. I think can be that balance. Sometimes people do get annoyed when all they're getting is questions, when sometimes they're asking for advice, input, or direction. And again, I think, always being directive can be very bad, but never being directive causes different problems. So,
Well
wow.
said. Want to do one more question?
Yeah, I think we have time. So, another question: these coffee mugs are not expensive, so we give away a couple other coffee mugs. And all right, so Marv, thank you also for your question. Kind of a shortened version, but I think this gets to the gist of it. I know of a company that would like to have the optics of trying to incorporate lean tools without culture. Certain groups must submit one continuous improvement idea per quarter, or it affects their bonus. They have 5S audits for certain groups and not for others. So the question here is what, if anything, can the group that's getting tools done to them, what can they do to push back in a way that actually stops waste and really do some good? Have you seen examples of this really working? Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately implementing tools for tools' sake or what are the optics for the customer? In some industries, the customers really dictate and mandate, thou shalt be doing these things. But like one thing I'll jump right into that I think is counterproductive, well intended but counterproductive, is the goal of something like one continuous improvement idea per quarter. And especially when now we're saying it's going to affect their bonus, I think we can all predict what's going to happen is like people are going to submit an idea just to submit the idea. For what benefit? They're doing it to tick the box. And why one? Like sometimes that actually kind of sets a cap. Yeah. We're like, well, I, I've got two ideas, but I'm going to hold one back for the next year, the next quarter. And I've seen this really happen of like, the goal was four per quarter and people don't submit more than four. I'm like, that sets the bar, I think, actually really low. And it's I think kind of a lazy attempt to spur improvement of setting a target instead of doing the things as a leader. Like you said a minute ago, like, oh, I don't want people to be inspired to wear their safety glasses. I do want people to be inspired to do Kaizen, do that more naturally and from more a place of intrinsic motivation. So I think sometimes not having that target counterintuitively can lead to more improvement if leaders are doing the right things.
Yeah, on the topic of targets, I think they do have a place when it comes to providing what I call refer to as activation energy, meaning going from 0 to 1. And we actually saw this. This is long, long ago at one of my clients. We had basically a precursor to Kinexus, digital
Mhm.
tool and keeping track of A3s and improvements. And what we found in the data across a very large population was very few people stopped at one. So a whole lot of people had zero. And then once they did one, they learned it wasn't as scary anymore. They got past the activation energy. They discovered it wasn't that scary. It wasn't as hard as they thought. They got some value out of it. And so very few people stopped there. They went on a two, three, four, five. And so we did put a goal in place is we want everybody to do one by the end of the year to get over that hump,
Mm.
right? And the same thing is like walking, right? It's like or exercise. It's like, okay, I don't care how long you walk. I just want you to walk, 5 times a day or 5 times a week. Just get going.
Or it's the baby steps approach of, hey, I mean, psychologists would say, stand up and walk in place 30 seconds while you're watching TV during a commercial break. Like that starts. And
It's sure.
became
It's from 0 to 1.
that now you're walking the entire commercial break, and now you're going to go for maybe a 30-minute walk. And
Yep.
there's something to be said for that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I just want to, I don't want to throw out the entire concept because there's value in it under the right set of conditions.
A balance again. We need.
The right place, the right time, the right reason. I do think when somebody there's sort of an implied um, intention in the statement at the beginning of this question, the term optics.
Mm.
And so I challenge this, right? Because we'll get versions of this question a lot, right? People are just, oh, they're just trying to get credit. They're just trying to do this. And you go look around and say, how many people that you work with do you not believe are good people? And well, no, I think they are good people, right? So then why is it so common that people are doing things for the wrong reasons, right? And so the question of, well, are they doing it for the optics? Um, or do they think they're doing the right thing? Right. And so often someone somewhere is doing things they think for the right reasons. It's just coming across wrong. It's just being deployed wrong. It's being misunderstood. So I might be doing it for the optics because my boss gave me a mandate but the boss had good intentions behind their mandate. It was just poorly executed and
Mm.
poorly delivered and the wrong decision.
Yeah.
So I think there's, first, I think we have to be curious about, let's understand where it came from. Let's assume some good intent and go back and understand, be curious about what that intent was. And then where did it go wrong along the way? And that kind of, where's the breakdown in the chain of leadership that got us to that? Because that then ties us back to, what's the pushback? I don't think it's the pushback. I think it's the redirect. And the redirect is, I'm going to take the energy coming at me, giving me the wrong stuff, and I'm going to try to steer it in a way that's more productive. I think the pushback, the very direct pushback, takes a lot of energy, doesn't produce, I'll say, converts, doesn't produce, curiosity, doesn't produce a better journey. It just stops, it creates enemies, it creates friction and resistance. And so I think pushback is often more counterproductive, where if we can take what's coming at us that might not be right, but start to, okay, how do we do that, but steer it in the right way,
Yeah.
steer it in the right direction, whatever that might be. And so is one idea per quarter bad goal, a bad bonus effect? Well, probably.
Yeah.
Should we be doing it anyway? Yeah. Okay. Well, then let's go do 10 a quarter, right?
Yeah.
Let's go embrace it. And we're going to help everybody hit the threshold so easily that they're going to forget it was even hard. And we're going to blow past it. We're going to engage everybody on our team and do a great job of that.
Yeah. And I mean, like your scenario of, that 0 to 1, they get activated, they get excited, they start doing more. That certainly can and does happen. I think it's also situational and leadership based. So like the most bleak example would be, you go to Target, you got to do one. And this, okay, boss, here's my one. And that's kind of the end of story. There's no energy for trying to implement the idea. It's just, okay, we're all checking the box and you get your bonus, and that's not going to activate people. But if that spark to get started leads to positive reinforcement and support to help you implement it or to help get it implemented, again, finding that balance of delegating and empowering versus being a servant leader and breaking down barriers. Yeah, I mean, that model certainly does lead to that ongoing engagement, but, I think the target can be a means to the end, and in too many organizations, the target is just a
Just the
target,
end.
end
Yep.
of story. So I think it comes back to leadership, it comes back to psychological safety. If people submit their one idea and they get told that's a dumb idea, that's not gonna lead to much more participation, even if they get their bonus. Now there's an element to the question Marv asked of like, well, 5S audits are done for certain groups and not for others. Hopefully people would feel the psychological safety to ask, why is that? And why aren't we all being treated equally? If this is important, why aren't we all doing it? And, if that seems like a very reasonable, fair question, there could be a good answer to it. And then you learn the answer, or hopefully you don't get punished for pushing back.
Yeah. And I think, again, kind of unraveling the question with a broader point, there is no perfect journey.
Sure.
All right. There's no perfect journey. And so we're going to have detours, distractions, and constraints that make the journey harder. In this case, those distractions, detours, and constraints are coming wrapped in lean, right? They often don't come wrapped in lean. It could be regulation. It could be company strategy. It could be leadership turnover. It could be economic downturns or layoffs. It could be all sorts of things that derail us and distract us and detour us. So it's, is it 5 steps forward and 3 steps back, right? Well, we were just trying to get the ratio as positive as possible. It's not going to be all forward steps. It's just maybe it stings a little more if some of those detours come wrapped in lean, but it's never going to be perfect. So we don't want to overthink the parts that aren't. We kind of, take them for what they are, do our best to redirect them, keep moving forward. And if the journey has to, significantly detour to get us back to where we want to go, it's okay. It's still moving forward. And so I'm not saying don't give voice to why there's a better way to do it, but don't let it hamper you from doing the positive things that are still going to work. Right? So if you're looking at the group next door going, why don't they have to do 5S? Well, invite them to your audits. Maybe they'll get breaks.
Yeah.
Let's try to get really good at our part of it. Let's actually try to make our 5S so good that it actually helps them
Yeah.
because their interface with us is clean and orderly and reliable, and they actually benefit from it. And they may never point to us and say, oh, well, we learned it from you. Doesn't matter. Well, we're not after credit.
Yeah.
We're after forward progress. So again, we sometimes get some bad things in the lean journey. They're well-intentioned, but flawed. And we will sometimes have some distractions and detours wrapped in lean that we just have to, continue to overcome, but not get overly distracted by them just because they're wrapped in lean.
Sure. Yeah. And I think some of it is old cultural habits with lean tools layered on top of it. So if the old mental models are people are lazy and they have to be incentivized or they won't do anything. And so then, that becomes some of the working model for some of these new lean initiatives, that the customer's making us do or what have you. Oh, it's
And in the end, we want a lot of this. We want a lot of doing the core work to be easier, but there's some aspects of lean that are harder. I mean, slowing down and doing real problem solving is harder than throwing solutions at it.
Yeah.
It's more effective, but it's harder. We have to think, we have to engage, we have to collaborate, we have to be curious and dig. It's harder. Okay, some things are harder, and that means there's going to be some resistance when people are looking for easy. We just have to stay after it. Right there. So
well, so I guess we'll leave it at that for that part.
some good questions. Appreciate everyone participating. Nobody gave us any softballs, or we might not have selected those anyway. But great questions. Appreciate everyone's participation and engagement in our conversation.
We'll send you a coffee mug. I'm holding up my favorite mistake coffee mug, gratuitous plug, as I sip water instead of coffee out of that. But yeah, we'll get these mugs made up. We'll get a design final so we can agree.
We will.
So thank you, everybody. And please feel free to submit some other questions. So we're going to end the episode as we normally do here with called the cultural share. One thing you've read, watched, experienced, listened to, or tasted. So Jamie, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm trying to break my habit. I tend to do a lot of books and documentaries, and I finished another book yesterday. I'm like, oh, I want to talk about that. That's not okay.
Okay.
Different direction. I've been playing around with a little bit. ChatGPT. I use AI tools quite heavily on a lot of things. I prefer to use Claude and Perplexity and Gemini for most things. I'm not a huge ChatGPT fan for various reasons, including I say its owner because that seems to be where we're headed. But I also think there's a lot of instability in how they're doing things that makes them less reliable long term. Anyway, they do have functionality that others don't that sometimes make playing better. And they have interface, a plugin for interface with Spotify. And so I've been sort of playing with building unique playlists. Because I love exploring music. I especially recently have been exploring jazz and in going into either depths or breadth of jazz,
Mhm.
typically explore.
Yeah, we've touched on that a little bit, and I love
We're
that.
touching on that, right? I think I talked about Frank West, the flutist in jazz before. So,
I think they say flautist, actually, which is weird because it's the flute. Sorry.
But basically, going to ChatGPT, kind of saying, here's what I want to listen to, build me a playlist with these parameters, and then hop into Spotify and listen. And it's not somebody else's curated. It's just sort of a custom curated, and you can toss it away because you didn't put a lot of time into curating this playlist that you feel committed to. And so I think whatever your music interests are, you can use ChatGPT to create playlists in Spotify that allow you to put some parameters forth. Here's the artist that I'm looking for, a sort of a vibe, but don't use these artists. There's an artist that give me a similar vibe to these artists, but don't repeat the same artist more than twice. And
Mhm.
create the parameters, build a playlist, give it a listen, have some fun. So that's my cultural share.
Interesting. I mean, I do I pay for ChatGPT, and it's better at some things compared to Google Gemini, which I've used, for some other purposes. If Apple ever gets their AI act together with Siri, I'm an Apple Music user, like, that should be part of a Siri integration, within all of that. But I've been using, I'll just mention randomly, this is not my item, but I've been doing, I've been using ChatGPT to role play as a search engine optimization and podcast growth consultant.
Mhm.
In particular with my favorite mistake episodes of the episode title, the first kind of sentence or two. So, like, my format has been basically title of the episode, then the streaming audio player, and then information about the guest in the show. And, ChatGPT is recommending some relatively minor tweaks of, well, change the title, add like two sentences at the very top, which is good maybe for the reader and for Google. Now it's not just the player. Here's some context maybe about why you should listen and what you're going to get out of it. And then some of the behind the scenes search engine settings that you can do within WordPress of, like, here's the key phrase, the meta description of the episode. So right now it's a hypothesis that a little bit of investment of time will lead to benefits. So I'm still going to evaluate that experiment. And I think it's good. It's customer focused. You're thinking about the phrases people would be searching for as opposed to what the title of the episode actually is. And it's got to be accurate. It can't be clickbaity, but that's one kind of active PDSA cycle that I'm going through now. But the thing I was going to share in terms of something, it's in the category of watching and listening to. My wife and I are both big fans of Brandy Carlisle, the American singer songwriter. Gino Wadding.
Yeah, I know Randy Carlisle. I probably have never put it on deliberately, right? So I will catch it in
Yeah,
different instances.
I'll encourage you, check her out on Spotify. She has a new album out pretty recently. She's singer-songwriter, guitar player, folk, country, rock,
Mhm.
depending on the song. She is kind of fluid across those different genres. But she did a Christmas special, and it wasn't like a highly produced, pre-recorded concert. Like, we watched the recording, but it was live streamed.
Mhm.
And, it was like $20 through a music streaming video service called Veeps. And it was kind of like a one-time payment thing, but we're huge fans, and, it's cheaper than going to a concert. But the live stream element of it was actually very charming. So it was like, it was professionally produced, like multiple cameras, the microphone setups were great, but it was at one of her homes. It's a log cabin, and so it was her and some other musicians, and like in the background were like family and friends sitting in the background, and there was a certain chaos to it. Or like, it felt so authentic, and it was like they were doing a show in your home.
Right.
Like, there weren't huge glitches or anything, but just it wasn't fully scripted in a way of like, okay, well, there was a plan, but it felt loose enough.
Yep.
It was actually kind of charming. And then, like, different, family members or children were coming in and singing. And so she did a lot of classic Christmas songs with her band. And that was one of our, like, kind of pre-Christmas, non-traditional things that we enjoyed, and
Yeah.
would recommend it to others, or just in general. We're going to go see Brandy do a concert in an arena in February, which will be slickly produced and
Sure.
a much bigger traditional kind of setting. But yeah, I would love to see more artists kind of do that sort of stripped down kind of approach to, I think podcasts are like that sometimes too, or live streams on LinkedIn. Like, yeah, it's the people appreciate authenticity and a glitch or two or a stumble is okay. It's just,
Yep.
personality shine through, I think.
Absolutely. That's why I do love jazz concerts, albums, because a lot of time, I mean, they'll talk about stuff, and then albums that have like second takes, right? It's like, well, here's the first take that we didn't
Mhm.
originally include, things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, sounds like fun. Sounds like a good environment, and enjoy the concert.
Yeah. Yeah. We're looking forward to that. So I think that's it for today's episode.
All right. Well, it's cold out there. It was 21 when I went out this morning, so warm up with some coffee,
Hmm.
and until next time, we'll stay warm.
Yeah. Happy New Year, everyone.
New
Cheers.
Year.